What's up, guys? This is Hitchy Good, your favorite all-American freedom-loving gamer, and today we're going over the spoiler-free review of Modern Warfare 2's campaign. Now, if you didn't pre-order the game, however, I strongly encourage you to spend some time in the campaign. This took me right about 7 hours to complete, so it's a decent length campaign, and it's filled with fleshed-out heroes, stunning visuals, and an enjoyable variety of gameplay to keep you entertained for the duration of your playthrough. A lot of us, including myself, are comparing this new experience with the original trilogy to see how it holds up, but in many ways, it's pretty hard to compare these two because after all, at the end of the day, nothing is ever going to match the weight of crawling across the fields of all gillied up, or that epic feeling of taking back our home turf from those damn communists. Hey! Get out of my refrigerator!
Alright, HQ, Bud Light has been secured, over.
Or the satisfaction of kicking back with Price and smoking a well-earned cigar as Makarov's lifeless body swung from the ceiling. It's just a different trilogy. It's a different series. By the way, I want to remind you to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps the algorithm. And if you do subscribe, leave a comment below letting me know you did. That way I can personally thank you. But for now, on to the video. Unfortunately, a lot of sequels like this often spend all their time trying to one-up their predecessor, and they end up overdoing it with the chaos and the action, foregoing all the storytelling and character development in a hollow attempt to just outdo the previous title through sheer force, right? Especially in Call of Duty. Do you remember Modern Warfare 3?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Well, fortunately for us, Modern Warfare 2 follows in the same vein of excitement and varied gameplay as its predecessor without going over the top, but still delivering a fun and engaging experience. Now, this game definitely isn't perfect. There were a few flaws here and there. There were some of the world's animation, like these ridiculous, lazy-looking birds looks like it was more of an afterthought. Maybe like walking through or crawling through the grass, trying to emulate the good old days of all gillied up. It didn't really feel like it worked that well. And I did crash on 2 different occasions, but hey, I've seen much worse stability issues from other games that were post-launch. So overall, a pretty solid playthrough. But it does have a pleasant amount of hat-tipping to fans of the original series, such as the 2-second cameo from Nikolai, the bringing back of the original Ghost mask, which I thought that was badass, to a rather shocking throwback during the game's ending cutscene, but we're going to save that for another video. First of all, this game is truly visually stunning. The cutscenes that we get to stare into the very souls of the characters on screen is really riveting. I mean, every emotion, every expression has been captured to sell the situation of whatever the player is witnessing. And back in Modern Warfare 2019, we think, man, this can't possibly get any better. Well, they've one-upped themselves again, and it looks photorealistic. I know we used to say that in 2009 probably, but it just keeps getting better. The particle effects, the gun animations, the explosions, the world destruction are all on point, which is quite often the case with Infinity Ward. And another thing that Infinity Ward does quite well at excelling at is the gunplay, which is also satisfying. And each weapon just feels unique in your hands. The plethora of weapons has you loading into each mission with a new setup, which I don't think I remember loading in with the same gun twice. Could have happened, but of course you can pick up your favorite weapon on the ground. But luckily the game keeps it fresh with offerings of newly kitted out firearms at pretty much every turn. There's also a decent stretch of the game where your character is injured and your enemies are bolstered with armor. In order to cope with this, though, Infinity Ward has introduced a somewhat quirky crafting system. I mean, it actually runs decently smooth, but at first I was annoyed with it as it's a significant departure from the rest of the COD series and how levels are played. But after a while, you learn that your character is hurt, that they can't move as fast, and that they're really lucky to get close enough to assault an enemy with a knife. And the game is giving you extra options to deal with that damage. This is actually something that COD is getting better at, and that's player choice, where you get to decide what tool you're going to use. How are you going to take these enemies out? Are you going to lay a mine down? Are you going to hit them with a Molotov? Or are you going to run through them with, a smoke bomb? But by the end of it, it's very apparent that you desperately need the tools that are presented to you in order to finish what I viewed as a substantially challenging level. And there's some levels that allow for varied gameplay, which is really good just to mix it up and keep you engaged. It's not all just, running and gunning, which can get old from time to time. but one of these was very similar to Modern Warfare 2019, which was a popular mission that had us guiding an embassy assistant through hostile areas around terrorists, but this time it's with Ghost, and there's a few added things. You get to knife enemies, you get to shoot them, you get to put charges everywhere on their vehicles, and they added just enough for it to not be boring and not too over the top to make it look like they're trying to one-up their, predecessors. There's also an entire section of the game where you drive vehicles and shoot out from the window, with each segment of the mission offering a new challenge to be overcome that was different from the last. I found this, pretty engaging, and it was nice to have a break from just running and gunning. And of course, no Modern Warfare game would be complete without an AC-130 level. What mission has never been awesome when an AC-130 is involved? And you actually had to take the time to make sure that you weren't hitting unarmed targets. You weren't just spraying and praying and leveling everything. You did have to be a little meticulous in where you place those shots. You had to lead your targets, which, added for a challenge, but also realism too, which I really enjoyed these levels. And also on top of that, there were a couple mini games where you have to use your brain just a little bit while under pressure, which for me can sometimes be a little more challenging than not. But before we go a little deeper in the intricacies of this storytelling and analysis, I do want to shift your attention to my retro review series, where I go back and I look at some of these past COD titles, some of these past Battlefield titles, and look at just why they were so loved, or in some cases hated. I love making these, and if you want a really nice hit of nostalgia, be sure to check the links in the description below. But for now, let's dive a little bit deeper into Modern Warfare 2. As far as the story and the message being offered in this playthrough, I think it piggybacks quite well off of the message of the previous entry in the series of Modern Warfare 2019. If you watch my review on that, which will be linked in the description below, I took away that the devs were trying to expose some of the awful actions that brave men often had to execute in order to keep the world safe.
Why have we got our hands tied?
Gaz mentions several times in the playthrough that he's just tired of the red tape, he's tired of the bureaucracy, he wants to take the gloves off, only to find himself hesitating to do so once confronted with the very real actions that have to be taken by Captain Price. Necessary actions to keep the world safe. Actions that went below the radar of bureaucracy, diplomacy, and the red tape. And I think Modern Warfare 2019 did that in a very tasteful manner.
You draw the line wherever you need it, Sergeant. At the end of the day, someone has to make the enemy scared of the dark. We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission.
Now, opposingly, Modern Warfare 2 showcases a balanced perspective on how going too far past diplomacy and ignoring some of those safeguards can also have dire consequences for good people. They showcased how someone who thought themselves above the law, above reproach, can seriously put good people in danger by acting in his own self-interest. Now, I'm not going to offer any spoilers in this review, but I'm going to showcase some things that I thought were rather obvious in the first few missions. I don't think it's going to take away from the experience for you at all, and a certain predictableness that comes with the bringing back certain turncoats from certain past years. I think you know who we're talking about. We expected to be wary of Shepard, especially when we see just how brashly he acts when giving orders concerning those lost missiles. He doesn't always conform to the standard common sense operating procedure, but is quite bullheaded about doing whatever it takes, not keep people safe, but save his own ass. In this particular instance, the main story of this game is you are trying to retrieve missiles that are from America and have gone missing. They're in the wild. That's what he's saying. I want to know how many they've got and where they plan to use them. In this case, we see our hero wrestling from the other side of the spectrum from 2019. He's trying to wrangle a situation that was caused by someone who got their hands too dirty, who wasn't trying to keep the world clean, but really his own record clean.
To do good, you've got to do some bad.
I felt this is a very appropriate balance to show both sides of the spectrum on this particular issue. I think they did that well. As far as character development goes, this is one thing that I think today's modern day trilogy is improving upon compared to the original, at kind of the detriment to the villains not being fleshed out really well, but we'll get to that in a second. There's a lot more voice lines from the actors. Each character seems to stand out a little bit more than before. In the missions I mentioned where you have to utilize the crafting system, we find that Soap and Ghost have a much more fleshed out brotherhood than previously presented in past titles. And better yet, it was actually believable. It was realistic. And I think part of what makes that believability is the Call of Duty improving on the spectrum of choice in their games. They seem to be getting better and better at this as time goes on. You know, just as we get to decide which gadgets, traps, explosives, and weapons that we want to use in this game, we get to decide what to say back to Ghost over the radio, and I just felt it to be a nice little touch to the series.
Sick bastard.
Soap, you're making progress.
Aye, getting there.
2 goldfish are in a tank.
Go on.
One turns to the other and says, "You know how to drive this thing." Little army humor.
Very little.
Another.
I got one for you.
Let's hear it.
Why was the strawberry crying?
Why?
Because he was in a jam?
Not bad. We could do this all night.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Captain Price and Gaz, for now, they kind of take a little more of a back seat in this story, but not a huge amount. That absence is readily filled by Ghost and Soap and our new compadre, Alejandro, who offers excellent intel to the team without being an over-the-top badass. And I really enjoyed like the beginning missions there. I felt very immersed on the border. That border town felt so realistic. There was one point where I accidentally killed someone in their own house. You know, this is why no-knock raids are a really bad idea. Oh shit! I really did not mean to. Oh shit! Come on! No, that's so bad. But in doing so, I just felt so bad about it. You know, I'm violating someone's Fourth Amendment rights and their property rights by chasing this guy down, and I accidentally killed him. I actually felt bad about that for a minute. But like I said, the new characters, especially Alejandro, they're not just over-the-top badasses for the sake of it, because I think really that slot is reserved for Captain Price and arguably Ghost, but I digress. We're going to get some comments on that. One thing I've noticed about the new generation of Modern Warfare versus the old is the much more focused approach of fleshing out the hero characters than the villains. But if we look back at the originals, Shepard had these really long, eloquent diatribes about national duty and this false facade that he had of patriotism. Makarov was this cunning villain that seemed to be everywhere at once. You saw him take part in these shocking atrocities, and you spent time playing right alongside him. Raul Menendez from Black Ops 2 was probably one of the most popular and one of the best, most fleshed out, deeply explored characters and villains in the Call of Duty series, who had real motivations. He had real perspectives, and you could kind of understand things from his point of view, even though you knew he was an awful person. But in this new version of Modern Warfare, it seems like the villains are somewhat kind of glossed over, and there's always several villains per game, which I think is a misstep. It kind of breaks up the storytelling, and it doesn't allow a lot of depth to any one character. For instance, in Modern Warfare 2019, we had Imran Zakhaev, who was the Wolf, we had the Butcher, we were going after him, and then we had General Barkov, and all of which weren't really that deeply explored, and we didn't have time to dive into each one. We didn't get to understand their motivations that well, and some of their actions didn't always make sense, and therefore they're less memorable. Modern Warfare 2, likewise. Oh, buddy, hang on there, big guy. You're about to enter into what we might call a little bit of a spoiler. So, right in this next section, we do talk about the villains listed off in Modern Warfare 2. If you want to skip that, go ahead and skip to this time right here. We're going to give you a couple more seconds to do that. Spreads that butter over too much toast by introducing Shepard, Philip Graves, and Hassan, very few of which have very meaningful backstories or motivations for why they're doing what they're doing. It's not a huge critique here, as I do think the focus is amped up for our heroes, but if the Modern Warfare series would just keep things down to maybe one villain, two at most, it'd be so much more satisfying and urgent to take them out and fight against them. We would have reason and causation to go after them, and you know, I think it would be a much better experience. One thing I got to give credit to Modern Warfare with on this is in a lot of the modern day reboots, we're seeing creators like Amazon and Disney and EA just completely shit all over their community that is their target audience, and then wonder why what they call quote-unquote entertainment ends up face planting in the reviews. You got EA. They came out and said, if you don't like our game, don't play it. You know that whole thing with Battlefield 5. You've got Amazon, who took over Lord of the Rings and deleting reviews. You've got Disney, who took over Star Wars, and they openly attacked their own audience for being a bunch of, fanboys or whatever. Even our beloved G4 TV, that had a head start on the competition just due to name ID, just due to name recognition alone, fell prey to this hatred of their own community when Frost comes out and tells everybody, if you don't like it, don't watch it. And then you've got Adam Sessler, who is absolutely unhinged, just a hateful person, publicly wishing death upon his own family because they voted for Trump, along with showing hatred for the rest of the viewers out there. He's still talking about fighting G4 fans on Twitter after this whole debacle has come to a crashing failure. But my point is, it's just a really nice breath of fresh air to have a group of developers that don't publicly hate their own consumers. Now, that shouldn't be that big of a plus, but in today's world, it is. The devs of Modern Warfare 2, I feel they do have a respect for the original characters of the series. They introduced new ones that interact well with the cast that we know and love, and the actions of each character made sense. Nothing felt unrealistic or, out of step with the universe. Nothing went out of the way to propagate a political statement. It was just decent. Not masterful storytelling, but it was decent storytelling, nonetheless. It's a COD game, and I'm sure we do have affinities to the characters, but most of COD's success comes from the gameplay, not a focus on the story so much. And the female characters in the game were capable, but not altogether badasses, which to me is realistic. One instance was when Laswell is wrestling an Alcatala member to the ground and breaking his neck, which I don't think is out of the question. A captor would not be expecting his captive to suddenly fight back, and with all the distractions that are going on in this scene, in this circumstance, it does make sense that his concentration would break and that Laswell could pull this off. In summary, most of this game really is pretty good. This isn't exactly a riveting masterpiece of the age. I don't think it is, but is it worth playing? I'd say absolutely. I say it's worth 7 hours. The developers really did put forth a good effort on this game, and maybe one day you can look back on the quote-unquote good old days of today and remember this campaign as a fun memory. But if you like this review, you need to click on this next video coming up in just a few seconds on Modern Warfare 2019 and just why it saved the Call of Duty franchise. God bless, happy gaming, get you good out.